this video, I'm going to show you how you can use the King's Indian on both sides of the board. We're going to talk about numerous variations and multiple plans. Keep in mind that the structure is easy to learn. The plans that go along with the structures are more important because if you know what the plan is, you know where all of your pieces go and you know what you should be doing. That's how masters think. So, looking at the King's Indian attack, we start with e4, and versus the French, our second move is d3, d5, knight d2, knight f6, knight f3, and gradually we are going to get to our structure. And here is the typical structure of the King's Indian, what we see from this box. And we want to take mental images of what we're looking to do in each variation. So continuing, after knight c6, rook e1. Now, when I look at this position, I see the first of the plans that we use when playing the King's Indian. Black has failed to put a pawn on e5, allowing us to use this square for what we want. If black was to play e5 in this position, we then could not play e5 and we would need another plan. That plan would be to take and place this knight on c4, as we would have piece harmony and be able to attack the e5 pawn very easily. Going back, we need to be aware of those two plans based off the structures. So after rook e1, if b5, we know the idea is e5, and we gradually, now since the best defender of the black king has moved away, we're going to start putting all of our pieces coming to attack the king. So first, knight f1 to get out of the way, h4, bishop f4. And gradually plans with moving this knight from h2 to g4 and this knight to g5 and queen h5 will be used in order to break black's position. So going back to move 1, let's look at it from black's perspective. Let's see how the King's Indian can be used against almost anything. The King's Indian cannot be played against e4 because as soon as you try to move your knight out, it gets kicked around. So, rolling back the position, let's see how the King's Indian can be used against the English. We would play knight f6, g6, d6, bishop g7, and there we have our King's Indian position. So let's see with move 1, knight f3. Knight f6, g6, bishop g7, d6. And if you notice, we've gotten the exact same position. This is called transposing. When you're able to get to the position later from a different move order, it doesn't matter. We can use this exact same moves and same openings against multiple things white can throw at us. Now let's take a look at some of the main lines, starting with the most common move that the King's Indian is reached from, d4. Now there are multiple variations of the King's Indian and plans to go along with each. First, let's look at the most commonly aggressive variation, the samish. Now the plan with the samish, white wants to castle on the queen side. He's going to place a bishop on e3, a queen on d2. He's going to castle, and then gradually he's going to push this pawn down and try to rip open the king side. If black does not attack quickly, he's going to get squished. So, in this position, knowing what white's plan is, we want to go ahead and attack where his king is going to be. In any position where the king's castle on opposite wings, you use your pawns to throw at the pawns in front of the enemy king. So, after f3, we play c6, and this is going to begin our plan to attack on b5 and attack towards where white's king is going. After bishop e3, a6, queen d2, b5. And as we can see, if white castles queenside here, we already have our attack started. Notice how black did not castle his king, because that makes white's attack easier. We're not concerned with moves like bishop h6. We can just take. And after b4, white's got a big problem. He's got to move his knight away. And we've already won a pawn. And if white decides to make this move, this is actually a mistake. We can just attack the queen and then try to trap her there. So be aware of this attacking idea, that when we are castling on opposite sides, both sides are trying to fling their pawns towards their opponent. Whoever opens up the other king first is usually the winner. Now let's look at another variation. This is called the four pawns attack. We want to immediately attack white's big center, because that center can push us around if we don't. c5. Now you say, well, if he takes, and I take back, he trades queens, but we don't take back. We play queen a5. You say, well, I'll take the pawn. Well, this doesn't work because if knight takes e4, and let's notice how the queen is pinning the knight is being attacked by both the knight and bishop. And even though white's won some pawns, we're about to win a piece. These are very strong tactics. So going back after c5, white usually plays d5. We castle. He plays knight f3. And then this is the key move to remember. b5. This is not a free pawn. If white's knight captures here, we capture a pawn in the center. If white's pawn captures, we play a6. This is a gambit. We're trying to gain time for our pawn. And you'll see very quickly that the amount of time that black gains, he'll get an aggressive attacking position. White takes. We play not takes yet. We're waiting. We're waiting for white to move this bishop. Because when we take, we want him to use another move to come and take. So it's like we've earned a full move, making him waste even more time. So first we play queen a5. This gets him to put his bishop on a weird square. Now we put a knight on its best square, knight d7. He finally moves his bishop. Now, capture. When he takes, he's moved the bishop twice, wasting a full move, and it makes it very difficult for white's king to castle. So he offers to trade queens, but we pick up even more time using our last piece that isn't doing anything, attacking a weakness. When he trades, we notice very quickly that white has numerous problems and he's behind in development. We're going to get our pawn back and we'll be able to attack very quickly. He can defend right now, but he's going to have issues after knight e8, a very strong move. Now we're thinking about capturing here, and we're also thinking about this knight traveling to b5, where it will cause white problems. Another idea is pushing this pawn to c4 and putting this knight to c5, trying to get to key squares as well. There are many ideas in the four pawns attack based off of this gambit idea. And remember, a gambit is when we're sacrificing material in order to gain time. Going back, let's look at one of the most popular variations, along with the two we've looked at, the Fianchetto variation. And it's called the Fianchetto variation because of this, house that's being built. Now the variation that I recommend against the Fianchetto is called the Pano. Knight c6. You say, well, that looks like a bad move because he can attack and kick my knight. Well, the knight is actually doing something on the side of the board. It's attacking this pawn. He must defend it. Now there's a threat. He's threatening to play b4 to trap our knight. So we defend the knight. If he captures en passant, we capture back with our knight and we're fine. So he castles. Now we're going to use the same idea we saw in the 4 pawns attack. We're going to play with the Binko Gambit idea, sacrificing a pawn to gain time. a6. And after queen c2, b5. When he captures, he's going to need to defend this knight. So when he runs away, I would love to put my bishop on this square and be able to control key squares. But this pawn is in the way. So first we play this move bishop f5. And we bring the bishop right back. After b3, now we play bishop a6. This is going to cause white some problems. And we use the same plan as the 4 pawns, where we bring the rook over, and we're going to use all of our pieces attacking on these beautiful open files that we created by sacrificing a pawn. Moves like c4 should come to mind. This long diagonal is opened after the knight being moved. Lots of very nice attacking ideas and tactical possibilities. So now, let's look at the main line of the King's Indian. Let's go back to the beginning, just to review. So first we have d4, and gradually we get our King's Indian set up. Now the main line is with knight f3, castles, bishop e2. Now this is called the classical variation of the King's Indian, and we typically see the move e5 here. And the first question to ask is, can white take and get away with it? Let's see. Takes, queen takes, rook takes back. One point to notice is that this capture is incorrect because we have the move knight takes e4. When he captures back, we're able to get our piece back. And we have more development than white. So instead of capturing that pawn, they usually play bishop g5, pinning the knight to the rook. We need to get off of this pin and protect our pawn. And after knight d5, we have a big problem if this knight stays, because he's either going to win a piece or take on c7, forking our rooks. So we capture the knight and immediately play against this strong pawn by playing c6. Black is considered to have a roughly equal position here. That is the exchange variation of the King's Indian. So going back, as soon as we have played e5, if d5 is played, this is the Petrosian variation. And now we will see another typical plan in chess. The pawn structure in the center is locked. Neither side can do anything to change these pawns. When the center is locked, we need to play on the wings. The wings being the king side and the queen side. And the 2 points that can attack the center are f5 and c5. White is trying to break black's center by playing c5. Black is trying to break white's center by playing f5. So the next move played is a move to play against this idea. Because white can't play c5 right now. He would need to play b4 and then c5. So black starts by playing a5. This is called prophylaxis. We're using a move to stop white's idea before it happens. After bishop g5, knight a6. Now we're going to put the knight here so the knights can work together attacking that pawn. So white prophylactically plays knight d2, so both knights will be defending this pawn. We'd like to be able to move this knight to be able to play f5, so we play queen e8 to remove ourselves from this pin. And after a3, white's trying to complete b4 and c5, his plan, so we play bishop d7. And after b3, we need to get our f-pawn moving. So, we can't exactly move the knight anywhere good, because the bishop would take us, and our pieces are in the way. So black has a very nice idea to get this knight out of the way so we can play f5. King h8. And after white castles, knight g8. We freed up another square. Now rook b1, f5. And this is where the game really begins. Both sides knew what the plan was and were attacking each other. Now let's see an example game between Boris Gelfand and Hikaru Nakamura, one of the most aggressive players of the King's Indian defense, which will show some of these ideas we just looked at. And that will conclude our lesson on the King's Indian and transpositions. So starting with move 1, d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, e4. Very important not to castle here, because he'll play e5 and kick our knight. We've got to defend. After knight f3, castles, bishop e2, e5, castles. Now, we want to attack white's center. The best way to do that is with the main line of the King's Indian, knight c6. This puts pressure on this pawn, forcing him to either exchange or push forward to attack our knight. If he defends, we will release the tension, but first, after bishop e3, we will play the move knight g4 to attack this bishop, causing it to run away. So in the game, Boris Gelfand played d5. Now, based off of our ideas that we talked about before, when the center is locked, what are the plans? First, we need to move this knight as it's attacked. So we place him on e7. He is going to help with our plan of wanting to play f5. The center is locked, so black is trying to play for f5 and go after white's king. White is trying to play c5 and break the pawns on the queen side where he has more space. So we see the move b4. Now we need to play f5, so we have to get the f6 knight out of the way. Knight e8. c5, f5. Now the action's starting to begin in the game. White plays knight d2. We don't want to take here because his knight would get to a great square and our attack would be over. We've got to use our pawns to break up his to open up his king. So knight f6. We don't mind if white captures our pawn here. We'll take back with a pawn. And I'm going to waste a few moves to show a plan that black could have. Now, we see very quickly, once I've wasted a few moves, how the open file that was created we can use with good effect to attack the king. Boris Gelfand understands this idea. So after knight f6 was played, he plays f3. Now, in order to break this pawn chain, we've got to make contact here. Remember, we hit e4 with f5 to try to weaken d5. Now, to weaken e4, we're going to have to hit f3. That means this pawn needs to come up to attack there. So, f4. And after knight c4, g5 to try to play g4. White's attack is moving on, trying to attack over here. Knight g6. Black is positioning as many pieces as he can to go towards the king for attack. Bishop a3. Now there's an X-ray on this rook. So Nakamura plays rook f7 with the idea of swinging this rook for attack or defense. Very, very important move. b5. Now we finally have to deal with the tension here because we're going to have a problem if he's allowed to play b6 with the pawn on c5. So captures, h5, getting closer to our attack. a5. Now he's getting closer to breaking here on our queen side. g4, b6, g3. Very important move. If white decides to try to close the position off with h3, sacrificial ideas with bishop takes pawn, knight h4, and gradually bringing our queen over to the queen side could cause white big problems in this position. That's why Boris Gelfand played king h1. Now, we need to open up some files. We need to get our heavy pieces attacking white's king. So Hikaru played bishop f8. He's trying to get the bishop out of the way so the rook can swing over. He's also preventing d6 from being played. Boris forces it anyway. Takes. Bishop g1. Boris begins to get afraid of the attack that's going to come at him. Knight h4. Rook e1. Now this is a move to try to begin our attack on white's king. Try to think of this move as a very strong tactic. We want to try to go after white's king as viciously as possible. Now we've got to make his king unsafe. Pause the video and see if you can think of a move that can get white's king out into the open. Hopefully you found the move. Knight takes g2. This is a very strong tactic. In the game, white played d takes c7. Now pause your video again. What's the best move? Black's knight takes the rook on e1. If he decides to take our queen, checkmate. So clearly he can't make that move. He plays queen takes e1. Now we play g2 check anyway, forcing the king out in the open. Check. Getting our rook where it's most powerful on an open file, attacking many squares. King h1. Now bishop h3, we're threatening mate again. We're not worried about him taking our queen because we'll always put him in checkmate on the next move. Bishop f1. Now queen d3, again protecting our queen and threatening checkmate. Very important ideas. He defends and attacks our queen. Bishop takes f1. If he takes our queen, we'll put him in checkmate on g2. Notice how every single move Nakamura is attacking him viciously. He can't give him a single move, otherwise he'll be losing. The King's Indian is a very aggressive opening. You can't waste any time, and you have to attack as hard as you can, otherwise you will lose because of your weaknesses. Queen takes f1. Now, we're in the middle of a big attack. Should we trade queens? Or do something else? That's right, we should definitely do something else. Take the knight. After rook c1, he took another knight. Queen. Takes. And after the move queen e6, Gelfand resigns because black is up a full piece, and he is going to have 2 extra pawns on the queen side to make queens with. A very nice and clean game. Hopefully this overview of the King's Indian shows you many ideas that you can use for both white and black. Remember the structure. The first place we want to get to is remembering that on either side of the board, this is the picture that we remember, and that it can be used against almost anything.